Hi there, I've been asked to go over the basics of how to use Vernier Graphical Analysis in order to be able to understand some stuff. So here we have a car crash, and if you click on the y-axis, you'll be able to see there's a whole bunch of data sets. In the newer version of Graphical Analysis, these columns are attached to data sets. And so if we put a velocity graph on there, I'm only seeing one graph. I can do this on two graphs. The challenge if I do this on two graphs, and I just have velocity on the top and force on the bottom, is that if I was to say zoom in on this peak, because that's what I was interested in, and I come over here and click the little plus button to zoom in, you notice my timescale on my bottom is not the same as my timescale on my top. And so you can get into all sorts of challenges with that. You can go to free graphs, but again, it becomes really hard to see exactly what's happening. So I tend to stick with one graph and try to look at velocity. And so here we can see that it's not moving, it's accelerating, it's getting faster. Basically a constant speed, although slowing down a little bit due to friction. Here there's something drastic happening, and so I would have said the VI, the velocity at the collision, the initial velocity was 0.694 meters per second, and then after the collision was probably about 0.031. So it is going backwards, but not very much, and does stop. And if we were to put a force curve on top of that, we can see, oh, this force starts at -1 when actually there isn't any force there, and you're like, oh, I stuffed it up, I forgot to zero the force sensor, and what do I do? Well, do I go back and redo all the calculations? Well, that's one option. But another thing you can do is if you come over here and you click on the force button, you can click add calculated column. And so I can call this force zeroed, and I can click on insert expression. And really what I'm trying to do is I'm going to add 1 to that number. And so X is the column that I'm interested in, which is the force, and then I can just add 1 to it. If I click apply, then you can see that force line is basically there, about 0.025 high. And so I can go back to that calculated, so zero force, and go column options, and go 0.99 or 0.98. And you can adjust that. And so now you can see, well, the force graph is sitting on 0 just like we'd expect it to. So that's really quite helpful. And so a force times time is actually called impulse. So it's called change of momentum. And so I can look at that, and I'm quite interested in to know what the area under that curve is. And so I can go view integral, and that tells me it's got an impulse or an area of 0.087. It's negative, meaning that the force is in the opposite direction to the way that it was moving, which is what we'd expect. I might want to look at that velocity graph, and I might want to know what its initial velocity is, and its final velocity. I could just go like this and go view statistics, and then it'll give me my maximum, my minimum, and it tells me at what time they were, and so that could be a helpful thing if you wanted that as well. Say I wanted to describe what was happening on that force time graph. I can come down to the bottom and I can go add annotation. I can say max force of -0.47 newtons, or whatever number that was. I can check that, and it's actually, basically 0.47 newtons, and I can move that around, and then I can add another annotation, and I could say force is 0 with no impact, or whatever you want that to be, and you can add that around. I can also, if I instead of looking at a velocity graph, if I looked at a position graph, here you can see that it's traveling at a constant speed, and maybe I just wanted to know what that constant speed was. I could click on this one and go apply curve fit and linear, and it tells me that it had a speed of, because the gradient of a position time graph is speed, and the m is the gradient, so it's got a velocity of basically 0.7 meters per second. That might be a helpful thing if that's what you wanted to know as well. Something else you might want to do, say data set 4, I'll say force there correctly. Data set 4 might be like the awesome one that you really want, and sometimes when you've got lots of data sets, it's hard to know which one's right. And so you might say rename, and so you could rename data set as zone number 1, and that might mean something to you if you've, and see now when you're going through, oh, that's the one I looked at, and then like data set number 7, wow, that was the really bad one, and so rename, so crumple set number 2, and so then it becomes quite easy to go through, and then you go data set number 11, or that was one we stuffed up, well, we can just delete that one, and then boom, that one's gone. So then you can get a nice set of data sets that you're dealing with. Acceleration data, so you can see here, and there was a lot of acceleration when it was first launched, and that there was a lot of acceleration, 25 meters per second up to 11 meters per second. So there's a lot of acceleration happening in that space, if that's something you wanted to discuss as well. Maybe one more thing that might be appropriate for me to talk about. The scaling here is normally pretty good. You can kind of do that just by grabbing the axes. But if you want to have a bit more control over that, you can go edit graph options, and you can say, actually, I want it to start at 0, and I want it to go to 3 seconds, and I want it to go from 0 to 1. I'm going to give it a title, and it can just make that look a little bit more professional if that's what you're after. So you might ask, how do I include that in my report? You come up to the top and you click export, and then you can save each graph as a picture. So you can save that somewhere in your file directory, and then you can include that into your Word document or what have you. And so every time you change something and you've got what you're looking for, you can then go for the top export and then save it as a PNG, so that then, you can then include each of those photos in your report. All the best.